So this is taking shape. Let's now enhance this mini dummy app here a little bit. And let's add an input of type text here, just like this. And below that a paragraph where I say your name. And in here I want to output the username, but now the user should be able to enter the name in this input here. And that's the new thing. So we can have a name field here in our data. Initially, it could be empty or your name, whatever you want. And we can output the name here with the double curly braces. But now I also have this input here. And whenever I type in here, I want to update the name which is output in this paragraph. Now, how could we do that? Well, now that we learned about listening to events, we should have all the tools we need for that. We can add an event listener with vOn. And now, of course, I don't want to listen to the click event, but to every keystroke. We could do this with key up or key down, which all have their special behaviors. The best event to listen to on an input HTML element is the input event, which is a default DOM event available on input elements. Nothing view specific, you can listen to the input event in vanilla JavaScript as well. Here with vOn, I'm telling Vue that I want to listen to this input event on this input element. And therefore now, again, we can specify the code between these double quotes that should execute when an input event is emitted, which will be the case on every keystroke. That is how the input event is emitted by default. So now again, we could put the code in here or use this better approach of using a method. So I'll do that. Add a little method here. Set name could be the method name because that's what we're going to do. Again, the name is up to you, but of course you want to name the method such that it describes what it's going to do. So here I'll use set name. And then I want to set this name, so this name property, which we added to our data object, equal to what the user entered. And that's going to be a bit tricky, won't it? Because how do we know what the user entered? We know that the user entered something because we're listening to that event, but how do we get the concrete value the user entered? Well, there is a built-in behavior built into JavaScript, not into Vue, which we can leverage. First of all, we can point at the setName method here, which is the method we want to execute on every keystroke. And now there's a cool behavior in JavaScript, not in Vue. Vue just also is able to use it. When you add an event listener, and you then point at a function that should be executed when that event occurs, that function will automatically get one argument. The browser will ensure that this argument is provided, so to say. And that will be an object describing the event that occurred. So here in setName, we can accept this one argument, this one parameter. You can name it however you want, but you will always get this by the browser. We would have gotten this here for add and reduce as well. We just overrode it with our own custom argument we're passing in. But since I'm not executing setName with parentheses here, but I'm pointing at it, I don't override it, and I let the browser provide this default event object. And why is this useful? Because this default event object will be full of information about the event. And for example, it will give us information about the HTML element on which this event occurred, which is the input element. And we can then read the current value stored in this input from that input element. And we get access to the target of the event with event.target. And that's vanilla JavaScript. This is nothing Vue specific. This would work in vanilla JavaScript as well. This gives us access to the element on which the event occurred. And this is the input element in this case, which will have a value property. Again, that's just vanilla JavaScript. And you can search for MDN input to find more documentation on this input element. And in here, you will eventually somewhere find that this has a value property which you can use to read what the user entered. So this will be the value the user entered. Set name will be called on every input event, so on every keystroke. And this should update the name, our data property here, with every keystroke with the value the user currently entered here. And then we're outputting name down there. And if we now save that and reload, I can enter Maximilian and you see how this updates in the paragraph below. And that's Vue's reactivity in action again. It allows us to listen to this event and execute this code, and it then also detects that name changed and updates it in the places on the page where updating is needed. And as a side note, if I inspect this here in the Chrome DevTools, there is something other interesting which we can notice. If you watch this part on the right here, this HTML code, you'll see that the parts that are re-rendered by the browser flash. You see the paragraph with my name flashes. Now you will also see that nothing else on the screen flashed. For example, the counter didn't flash. This counter only flashes if I change the counter. Now these are the parts which are actually re-rendered on the screen. And you see that only the parts that really changed in code are re-rendered on the screen. And that's important. If Vue would update the entire screen whenever something changed somewhere, this would be bad for performance. Instead, Vue is really smart and it sees that with every keystroke here, only the name changes, and hence it only finds the places where I use the name, in this case this paragraph, and updates that. And the rest is, well, left untouched, and hence we save performance or have a better performance. Now, this is how we can work with events. There's just one more note about this default event object. You could have a scenario that you need to call your method explicitly on your own here, as we did it with add and reduce. For example, because you need to pass in some other argument, like a second name, which I always want to use here. We could accept this here, second name or last name, and then update name with whatever the user entered plus last name. Maybe also add a white space in front of it. The problem with that is that we now no longer get this default event object as a first argument here. Now, to still pass that in, there is a special variable which you can use here in your template, and that's $event. This is a reserved name, and Vue gives this variable to you to give you access to this built-in default event object, which you get automatically by the browser, so that you can use it here in this code as well, and for example, still pass it in as a first argument to setName if you wanted to. So whenever you find yourself using an argument here, or you simply can't just point at a function for whatever reason, and you need that built-in event, you can access it with $event. But again, this is only needed if you're not just pointing at the method as we did it before. Hence now if I reload, this still all works as before, but now with help of $event. That's just another side note because sometimes this is exactly what you need to get access to both the built-in event object you get automatically and still execute code on your own explicitly, for example, to pass in your own arguments.